Yeah, it's a layered, complicated question. I think there's lots of, I think there's some operational and logistical positives around it. I can just share like, so in our league, and sometimes like we'll play double headers, like a men's and women's game.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like just the fact that, we may play a game after the women, and so
And the
they
game's
not
going to
having
end at a certain
yet to know in
time.
the
Yeah.
game. And so there was some operational things that I really like and logistically just liked in
Yeah.
terms of just timing and just,
Yeah.
so some of those things I really liked. I think from a physical and mental component, I think there was some positives around it, to not
Mm-hmm.
have to manage an overtime game, and then have to do that
Yeah.
turnaround. Again, timing, recovery, and time component and safety of the
Yeah.
players, I think is continues to be
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
I think should be at the forefront of the NCAA's mind. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
for me, I think like positives around that
Mm-hmm.
component as well. Um, I did think it just kind of drew out maybe some of the negative sides of soccer sometimes. And again, that they're part of the game. I think some of the time wasting and
Yeah.
some of the areas around that aren't for me like part of the best parts
Yeah.
of soccer in general. And again, they're part of the game. So again, we could maybe make some arguments, especially at the highest levels. You're just seeing some of those kind of tactics
Yeah.
come into things, and I felt like that was something that I saw a lot over the course of the year for
Mm-hmm.
teams trying to maybe get a draw.
Yeah.
And we were probably, maybe on the receiving end of those type of things
Mm-hmm.
versus us trying to get a draw.
Yeah.
Wasn't normally kind of our MO throughout the year, but um, again, I think, so I think those were maybe some of the things that I thought were or something that I think the NCAA's got to kind of be thoughtful of just kind of the
Mm-hmm.
time management of the game.
Yeah.
And so and again, it just makes like another thing that I think the officials are going to have to kind of work on. And
Yeah.
for me, it's already a challenging reffing a men's college soccer game
Mm-mm.
is not an easy thing. And so I think
Yeah.
adding another layer to what they've got to kind of adhere to, I think is tricky, for our officials. So again, I'm a soccer purist, so seeing some of these things and just playing the 90 minutes, I think I kind of, again, part of me likes it, but also I think psychologically, the team that's trying to get a draw does
Mm-hmm.
do some things that are going to help them, in that
Yeah.
moment, and knowing a kid knowing they have to manage 7 minutes versus 27 minutes for me is a psychological
Yeah.
boost that those teams are going to have. So, um, yeah,
Coach, let me ask you now that because it did, you sort of suggested it. Do you think like there were? Do you think like coaches, and again, not maybe not in your case because of right, you were there's very few occasions I think on your schedule where you were I don't want to say the underdog, but like the Chicago game, that's a tough frigging game, right? Like so, do you think guys came to play you and said, you know what, we're going to hold out as long as we can because if we can get a tie, we'll take the point.
yeah.
Do you think
I mean,
that happened?
I think it exists. I also think it probably exists more as the game goes on too. So
Mm-hmm.
again, you're not necessarily setting your team up to get a tie, but as the
Mm-hmm.
game goes on and it stays tight, and do you start to do some things that kind of maybe, and I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I actually don't think that's necessarily wrong too, right? Like,
No,
uh,
no, no. I just,
to be,
yeah,
but again, I think so. Some teams may set up to say, hey, we're away from home.
yep,
Oh man, we're not playing well. Oh man, this kid just got knocked out. Like,
yeah,
how do we manage to get a point? Let's not, okay, we may not win this game, but let's not lose this game.
yeah,
I think that definitely plays a part, and I think it's easier to execute that without the overtime, and
yeah.
so I think it
Oh,
becomes a
absolutely.
more
Yeah,
realistic kind of, way of still getting a point in a game.
yeah,
And so, I mean, we fought for some points too. I think we were down in Nebraska Wesleyan and scored with, 16 seconds to go or something.
mm,
Ended up being a super important point for us, in the grand scheme of things. But again, if we go into that and have 20 more minutes to
yeah,
play and score late, now what does that look like, over the
yeah,
course of 20 minutes. So
yeah,
um, yeah, so I don't necessarily think teams are like saying that is. I mean, some teams, like again, if you feel like you're so undermatched, like, hey, let's try and keep this tight and use our
Yeah.
tactics and be smart and be
Yeah.
slower in
Yeah.
some of these areas. I think again, it's maybe not the best part of our game, the game that we love, but it is our
Yeah.
game. And so how do we,
Yeah.
show some maturity in those moments too? Yeah. So, I mean, I think yes and yet, yes and no a little bit, right? I think some
Yeah.
teams just get set and again, all right, we're down a man. I'm going to get a draw, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's not lose this game because I'm now, we've got
Yeah.
picked up a red card and now we've got some things to manage. So
Yeah.
I think we're seeing some of those tactics come out. And again, not necessarily, again, we can say it's negative tactics, but I just think it's tactics to try and get a point and keep,
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't lose, but you don't win, right? And you just kind of can move on.